In a universe where chains are forged from adamantium, where screams echo through iron corridors, and where mercy is a weakness that gets entire worlds burned, the idea sounds almost absurd. Yet somewhere on the cold edge of the eastern fringe, beyond the reach of imperial law and beneath banners painted in calm blues and clean whites, there exists a kind of captivity so quiet that most never realize when it begins. No whips crack here. No executioners wait in shadowed halls. There are no oubliettes, no flesh pits, no screaming engines of pain. And that, perhaps, is why Tau prisons are among the most unsettling places in the entire Warhammer 40,000 galaxy. The Tau Empire presents itself as something radically different. Where the Imperium of man rules through fear, dogma, and endless punishment, the Tau claim to rule through reason. They speak of unity, of cooperation, of progress achieved not through domination but through understanding. To the average imperial citizen, this rhetoric sounds like heresy wrapped in lies. To a captured soldier, dragged from a battlefield littered with burning tanks and broken bodies, it sounds like madness. And yet, for those who have actually crossed the threshold into Tau captivity, the experience defies every expectation shaped by the brutal norms of the galaxy. The first thing a prisoner notices is what doesn't happen. There is no ritualized humiliation. No ceremonial stripping of identity. No beatings to establish dominance. Wounds are treated. Pain is dulled. Hunger is addressed. The Tau do not shout, do not sneer, do not threaten damnation or death. Instead, they speak calmly, almost gently, explaining procedures, apologizing for inconvenience, and assuring the captive that cooperation will lead to comfort. To someone raised under imperial rule, where a guardsman's life is worth less than the ammunition in his rifle, this gentleness feels wrong. Suspicious. Like the stillness before an ambush. Tau prisons are not designed to inspire fear. They are designed to erase it. Clean lines replace iron bars. Soft illumination replaces flickering lumen globes. The air is filtered, temperature controlled, and free of the industrial stench that clings to most imperial facilities. Cells, if they can even be called that, resemble austere living quarters more than cages. There are no visible locks, no chains binding wrists to walls. Surveillance exists, certainly, but it is subtle, omnipresent in a way that quickly becomes invisible. You are always watched, yet never reminded that you are. This absence of overt cruelty is not an accident. The Tau understand something that many in the Imperium do not. Pain creates resistance, but comfort creates doubt. When a prisoner is beaten, starved, or degraded, hatred becomes easy. When a prisoner is fed, healed, and spoken to with respect, hatred becomes complicated. Questions begin to form. Why are they doing this? What did they want? And most dangerously of all, is this actually better than what I came from? In the Imperium, prisons exist to punish. In Comorig, they exist to entertain. In the domains of chaos, they exist to corrupt and consume. But in the Tau Empire, imprisonment serves a different purpose entirely. A Tau prison is not meant to break the body. It is meant to unmake the self. The goal is not obedience through terror, but alignment through understanding, or at least something that feels indistinguishable from it. Every interaction, every meal, every moment of quiet reflection is carefully calculated to guide a prisoner toward a single realization: resistance is irrational, and the greater good is not an enemy. And this is where the true horror begins. Because when a captive realizes they are not being tortured, not being punished, not even truly being hated, the familiar anchors of rage and defiance start to slip away. There is no monster to scream at, no villain to curse in the dark. Only calm voices, open hands, and the unsettling sense that somewhere along the way, the prison stopped feeling like a prison at all. So before we go any further, before we examine the routines, the re-education, and the choices offered behind those pristine walls, one question must be asked, quietly, honestly, and without comforting lies. That question sits at the heart of everything the Tau Empire does, and nowhere is it more clearly exposed than in the way they deal with captives. To understand what a Tau prison truly is, you first have to let go of everything the galaxy has taught you about justice. In Warhammer 40,000, suffering is the default language of power. The Imperium crushes dissent with labor camps and firing lines. Chaos twists prisoners into living warnings. Even survival is a form of cruelty. Against that backdrop, the Tau appear almost impossible, an empire that claims it can achieve obedience without fear, loyalty without pain, and order without endless bloodshed. The Tau call this guiding principle the greater good, and it is not merely a slogan or a political tool. It is a complete worldview, one that divides every being in their society into a role that serves the whole. To the Tau, individuality is not sacred. Purpose is. A thing only has value when it contributes to the collective, and waste, whether of resources, time, or lives, is considered the greatest failure of all. This belief reshapes everything, including how they view prisoners. Where others see enemies to be punished or discarded, the Tau see misaligned assets, beings who have not yet understood their place. This is why Tau prisons do not exist to extract revenge. Revenge achieves nothing. It does not strengthen the empire. It does not expand understanding. It only perpetuates conflict. Instead, Tau imprisonment is designed to pause a person's momentum, to remove them from the chaos of war and ideology, and place them into an environment where their beliefs can be examined, questioned, and slowly dismantled. From the Tau perspective, killing a prisoner is the most barbaric option possible. Death erases potential. Conversion preserves it. And here is the uncomfortable truth most Imperial citizens are never prepared to face. For many prisoners, Tau captivity is the first time they experience consistency, fairness, and calm. No arbitrary punishments. No screaming overseers. No daily terror of execution for failing to meet impossible quotas. In Tau hands, a prisoner is fed the same way every day, spoken to with the same measured tone, and treated as though their thoughts, however flawed, were worth engaging with. This stability is not kindness. It is groundwork, because once the noise of fear is gone, something dangerous happens. The mind begins to wander. Comparisons form. Memories resurface. An Imperial guardsman remembers being beaten by his own commissar. A civilian recalls starving under planetary tithes. A rebel alien realizes the Tau didn't slaughter their entire species on first contact. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the question shifts from, how do I escape? To, why was I fighting them in the first place? And this is where watching to the end truly matters. Because by the time this story is complete, you will understand something most people never consider, that the Tau prison is not defined by walls or cells, but by ideas. Ideas that follow prisoners even after release. Ideas that can survive interrogation, propaganda, and even faith. If you stay with this story until the very end, you will see how some prisoners leave Tau captivity physically free, yet mentally unable to return to the lives they once believed in. The Tau do not shout their superiority. They let others discover it for themselves. They do not demand loyalty. They cultivate it. And long before a prisoner realizes what is happening, the most important battle has already been lost. Not on the battlefield, not in a cell, but quietly, inside the mind. This is the moment every Tau prison is designed to reach. Once the shock of capture has passed, once the absence of pain becomes routine, the prisoner enters a phase far more dangerous than terror, calm. In most corners of the galaxy, captivity is loud. Orders are barked. Alarms blare. Screams remind you exactly where you are. But Tau detention strips all of that away. Days unfold with mechanical precision, so smooth and predictable that time itself seems to lose its edge. And in that quiet, the mind begins to soften. A typical cycle inside a Tau prison does not feel like punishment. It feels like structure. Prisoners wake at consistent intervals, guided by soft tonal signals rather than harsh sirens. Meals arrive at the same time each day, nutritionally balanced, carefully tailored to the prisoner's species and biology. There is no scramble for food, no reward for aggression, no advantage gained by dominance. Even movement is calm, escorted, yes, but never rushed, never forced. The Tau understand that chaos breeds defiance. Order breeds acceptance. What unsettles most captives is the absence of visible authority. Guards exist, but they are rarely imposing. Drones hover silently, observing without judgment. Tau personnel speak politely, often addressing prisoners by designation rather than insult. There are no threats of execution for noncompliance, no dramatic displays of power. Instead, rules are explained. Expectations are clarified. Consequences are stated in neutral terms. When a rule is broken, the response is correction, not cruelty. Over time, the prisoner realizes something deeply disorienting: no one here seems angry with them. This controlled environment begins to reshape behavior almost automatically. Without violence to react against, aggression loses its purpose. Without fear, paranoia weakens. Prisoners who once survived by suspicion and hostility find those instincts slowly dulling. Conversations, when permitted, are monitored but not suppressed. Silence is not enforced, but neither is rebellion encouraged. The Tau are patient. They are willing to wait days, weeks, even months for a mind to reach the conclusions they want. And while the body adapts quickly, the mind adapts faster. Prisoners start sleeping better. Injuries heal properly. Chronic pain fades. Malnutrition reverses. For many humans especially, this is the healthiest they have ever been in their lives. That realization brings discomfort, guilt, confusion. How can the enemy provide what your own empire never did? The Tau never answer that question directly. They simply let it sit, unanswered, growing heavier with every passing day. This is not mercy. It is preparation. The Tau know that before they can change what someone believes, they must first show them what stability feels like. Only then can they begin to contrast it with the chaos the prisoner once called normal. Only then can the idea of the greater good feel less like propaganda and more like relief. And once that seed is planted, the prison no longer needs walls. The prisoner carries it with them. Because the most effective cage is the one you stop noticing, and the most powerful captivity is the one you start defending. Once the routine has settled in and the mind has begun to adjust, the Tau take the next step, one so subtle that many prisoners don't even realize it has begun. There is no announcement, no formal declaration that re-education has started. No one is dragged into a chamber or strapped into a device. Instead, the change arrives quietly, disguised as conversation, curiosity, and concern. The Tau do not interrogate the way the Imperium does. They do not demand answers. They invite them. This is where the water caste becomes central to the experience of Tau imprisonment. Calm, articulate, and endlessly patient, they are trained not to dominate a discussion, but to guide it. A water caste envoy may sit across from a prisoner in an open, neutral space, asking questions that seem almost harmless. Where are you from? What was your role before capture? What do you believe your empire stands for? There is no pressure to answer quickly. Silence is allowed. Hesitation is respected. The Tau understand that people reveal more when they feel heard. Information is never extracted through pain. It is drawn out through validation. A prisoner speaks of the Imperium's cruelty, and the Tau do not contradict them. They nod. They acknowledge the suffering. A guardsman complains about meaningless orders and wasted lives, and the Tau agree that inefficiency is tragic. The prisoner begins to feel something rare: recognition. Not agreement, not alliance, but understanding. And once that door opens, the Tau begin to shape what comes through it. Education follows naturally. Prisoners are offered lessons, not forced indoctrination, but structured explanations of Tau history, philosophy, and society. These sessions are framed as opportunities rather than obligations. The greater good is presented not as a commandment, but as a solution to problems the prisoner already recognizes. War, scarcity, oppression, chaos, each is addressed calmly, methodically, with examples of how the Tau believe they have overcome them. Crucially, the Tau do not claim perfection. They claim improvement, and that makes the message harder to reject. The most dangerous weapon in this process is choice. Prisoners are given options: attend or decline, engage or remain silent, participate or observe. Cooperation brings small privileges, more time in communal areas, access to educational materials, increased autonomy. Refusal brings no punishment, only stagnation. Nothing gets worse, but nothing improves either. Over time, the prisoner learns that resistance achieves nothing at all. It does not even feel heroic. It feels pointless. Slowly, identity begins to shift. Old loyalties weaken as new frameworks form. Symbols once held sacred lose their emotional weight. The Aquila feels distant. Imperial dogma sounds hollow when repeated aloud. Even anger, once a source of strength, begins to feel exhausting. The Tau never say, "You are wrong." They simply provide an environment where being wrong becomes the prisoner's own conclusion. And this is the moment where Tau imprisonment reveals its true nature. There are no chains on the body, no scars on the flesh. But something far more fragile is being reshaped: the sense of self. The prisoner is not broken. They are rebuilt, carefully, patiently, into something that can exist within the greater good. Because once a person believes they arrived at an idea on their own, they will defend it more fiercely than anything forced upon them. By this stage, most prisoners no longer count the days. Time inside a Tau prison loses its meaning, not because it is chaotic, but because it is consistent. Nothing dramatic marks the passing cycles. No punishments to dread, no executions to witness. Just a steady, controlled existence where every need is met and every interaction feels deliberate. And in that stability, something profound begins to happen. The old version of the prisoner starts to feel unnecessary. The Tau understand identity as a system, not a soul. Beliefs, habits, language, symbols, these are components that can be adjusted without violence. Prisoners are gradually separated from the cultural anchors that once defined them. Imperial creeds are not banned, they are simply never reinforced. Prayers go unanswered, not through mockery, but through silence. Over time, devotion without response begins to feel empty. In its place, the Tau introduce concepts of contribution, efficiency, and shared purpose. Not as replacements, but as alternatives. And alternatives are far more tempting than ultimatums. Language itself becomes a tool. Prisoners are encouraged to communicate using Tau terms where practical. Not demanded, encouraged. Words like duty are replaced with function. Obedience becomes alignment. Sacrifice becomes contribution. These changes seem minor, almost cosmetic, but they alter how a prisoner frames their own existence. To serve is no longer to suffer. To comply is no longer to submit. It is simply to take part in something larger and more orderly than oneself. Hope is carefully regulated. Prisoners are shown examples of others who have progressed further along the path. Former enemies now living within Tau society, working, contributing, and receiving recognition. These individuals are not paraded as trophies. They are introduced casually, as if their transformation were the most natural outcome imaginable. Watching them triggers something dangerous: aspiration. The idea that there is a future beyond captivity, not through escape, but through acceptance. At the same time, the Tau ensure that defiance never becomes glamorous. Those who resist entirely are not punished. They are simply left behind. No special attention. No dramatic consequences. They remain in the same controlled environment, day after day, unchanged, while others move forward. The message is unspoken but unmistakable: progress exists, and it is available, but only to those willing to move with the system. Resistance becomes synonymous with stagnation. Eventually, a moment arrives that every Tau prisoner must face. It is not announced. It is not forced. It is the quiet realization that the person you were before capture no longer fits the life you are living now. The anger feels outdated. The loyalty feels abstract. The identity feels like a story belonging to someone else. And in that moment, the prison no longer feels like an enemy. It feels like a transition. This is the point where Tau captivity reaches its most unsettling truth. You are not being held here because you are dangerous. You are being kept here because you are unfinished. And once the Tau decide that the transformation is complete, the bars you never saw were already gone. This is the question that lingers once the transformation has taken root, because by now the Tau prison has achieved something few powers in the galaxy ever manage. It has made captivity feel logical. The routines are familiar. The expectations are clear. The future, while not entirely known, appears stable. And against the madness of the wider galaxy, stability is a powerful drug. For many prisoners, the thought of leaving no longer inspires relief. It inspires anxiety. The Tau are keenly aware that not all minds respond the same way. Humans, for instance, arrive shaped by brutal hierarchies and constant threat. Many Imperial guardsmen quickly recognize that Tau imprisonment offers a level of dignity they were never granted in service. No commissar watching for hesitation. No pointless charges into gunfire. No prayers demanded before orders that guarantee death. For these prisoners, the contrast is devastating. The Tau do not need to criticize the Imperium, the comparison does all the work for them. Civilians respond differently, but no less profoundly. Those taken from Imperial worlds often carry deep, unspoken trauma, hunger, forced labor, arbitrary punishment. In Tau custody, they are asked about their skills, their preferences, their aspirations. Questions they have never been allowed to consider. When a system treats a person as more than replaceable flesh, it rewrites their sense of worth. Many civilians struggle not with hatred of the Tau, but with resentment toward the empire that conditioned them to accept suffering as normal. Not all prisoners adapt so smoothly. Some species, some individuals, resist in ways the Tau consider inefficient. These prisoners are not brutalized. They are assessed. If realignment is deemed unlikely, the Tau do not escalate cruelty. They reduce investment. Such prisoners remain contained, sustained, and observed, but no longer guided. To be ignored by the Tau is to be judged beyond utility, and in their philosophy, that is the closest thing to condemnation. Perhaps the most tragic prisoners of all are the Tau themselves. Those who remain within the Tau Empire face a different fate. They are no longer prisoners, yet they are never quite citizens in the way a Tau is. They are integrated carefully, assigned roles that maximize usefulness and minimize disruption. They are watched, but not distrusted. Supported, but never indulged. For many, this is enough. They find peace in function. Identity dissolves into purpose. The greater good becomes less an ideology and more a habit of thought, automatic, reassuring, inescapable. And then there are those who understand the truth too clearly. Those who realize that the Tau never needed chains, never needed torture, never needed terror. They conquered through patience, through kindness, through letting their enemies experience a world where things simply worked. These individuals live with a constant, gnawing awareness that the Tau's greatest weapon is not technology or firepower, but comparison. Once you have seen an alternative to endless suffering, you cannot unsee it. This is why the Tau prison is so deeply feared by those who truly understand it. Not because it is cruel, but because it is convincing. It does not destroy you. It invites you to step away from who you were, and then quietly closes the door behind you. Whether you stay or leave, whether you serve the greater good or reject it, the prison follows you. In memory, in doubt, in the silent realization that somewhere in the galaxy, captivity was the first place that ever felt rational. And that is the final, haunting truth of Tau imprisonment. You can escape the walls. You can reject the philosophy. You can even fight the Tau again. But once the question has taken root, once you have felt a system that does not need your suffering to function, you are never entirely free again. Not every prisoner fits neatly into the Tau vision of progress. Some minds bend, some minds adapt, but a few remain rigid, not defiant enough to justify disposal, not receptive enough to justify reintegration. These prisoners exist in a strange limbo, and how the Tau handle them reveals the cold precision beneath their calm exterior. The Tau do not rage against failure. They categorize it. If a prisoner cannot be aligned with the greater good, then they are redefined, not as an enemy but as a static variable. For these individuals, imprisonment becomes permanent without ever becoming brutal. Their conditions do not worsen. Their needs are met. Their health is maintained, but the process stops moving forward. No further education, no deeper engagement, no future promised or denied. Just existence, carefully sustained and quietly observed. To an outsider, this may look merciful. To the prisoner, it is suffocating. There is no struggle to fight against, no cruelty to resist. Only time, stretching endlessly, offering nothing new to push back against. The Tau believe that identity is shaped by interaction. When interaction ceases, identity erodes. These forgotten prisoners slowly lose their sense of direction. Without progression, without resistance, without meaning, the mind turns inward. Some begin to speak less. Some stop speaking entirely. Others cling desperately to old beliefs, repeating them like rituals, hoping repetition will keep them alive. The Tau do not interfere. They have already made their judgment. These beings no longer contribute, but they do not disrupt either. They are preserved, not punished. This approach exposes a truth that is easy to miss amid the Tau's language of unity. Compassion, in Tau philosophy, is conditional. It exists to serve efficiency. When compassion no longer produces results, it is withdrawn, not violently, but completely. The prisoner is not hated. They are simply no longer worth the effort. In a galaxy of overt cruelty, this quiet abandonment is one of the Tau's most chilling traits. And yet, even among these forgotten captives, the greater good leaves its mark. They remember the order, the calm, the logic. Even as they reject it, even as they resent it, it remains the most coherent system they have ever experienced. The Tau do not need these prisoners to convert. The damage is already done. The old world has been exposed as broken, and no amount of defiance can fully erase that knowledge. This is the final layer of Tau imprisonment, the realization that resistance itself has been redefined. You are not fighting an oppressor who thrives on your suffering. You are opposing a system that simply does not need you. And in a universe where meaning is forged through struggle, being rendered irrelevant may be the harshest sentence of all. For those who have endured the full cycle of Tau imprisonment, the question of freedom becomes more complicated than any chains could make it. Release is not dramatic. It is not heralded with fanfare or celebration. It is presented as a choice, rational and measured, framed as the next logical step. Some prisoners accept eagerly, ready to leave the controlled environment. Others hesitate, suddenly unsure whether the world outside is better or worse than the order they have grown accustomed to. And some quietly refuse, preferring the predictability of containment to the uncertainty of liberty. Those who step back into the galaxy quickly discover a startling truth. Freedom outside the Tau system is louder, harsher, and infinitely more dangerous than they remembered. Orders are chaotic. Authority is arbitrary. Violence is not only accepted, it is expected. Imperial worlds punish mistakes with death. Battlefields demand instinct, ferocity, and blind obedience. For a mind that has learned patience, structure, and the logic of contribution, the old ways feel unbearable. Every shout, every threat, every senseless rule becomes an assault on the reasoned mind they honed in captivity. Some former prisoners adapt. They find ways to navigate the chaos, using lessons learned in Tau custody to survive, and even excel, in unpredictable environments. They question orders selectively, anticipate outcomes, and calculate risks with the precision of someone who has seen an alternative to fear-based obedience. Yet even these survivors are marked. They carry the memory of the calm. They carry the knowledge that suffering is not inevitable. And the presence of that memory makes them strangers among their own kind. Others are broken not by violence, but by comparison. Imperial soldiers may return home only to despair at the inefficiency and cruelty that surrounds them. Civilians may find themselves unable to accept arbitrary suffering or injustice, alienated from the world they once knew. Some try to speak out, to change things, but their words fall on ears untrained to listen, on systems incapable of understanding. In effect, they are free, yet imprisoned by the realization that the galaxy will never function as they now know it could. Even those who choose to stay within the Tau system face an internal struggle. They are no longer captives, yet the transformation is irreversible. Their identity has been reshaped to align with a philosophy they once resisted, and the comfort of order now feels essential. Without it, the galaxy's chaos becomes unbearable. They serve willingly, contributing to the greater good not because they are forced, but because their own judgment now sees it as rational. And in that willingness lies the quietest, most insidious form of captivity, a voluntary surrender that feels entirely like freedom. By the time the full weight of Tau imprisonment is understood, the prison itself has ceased to exist in any physical sense. It resides in the mind, in memory, in habit, and in perception. Escape is possible, rebellion is possible, but the subtle truths learned inside, the calm, the logic, the structure, follow prisoners everywhere. And once experienced, the outside galaxy can never feel entirely like home again. It is the silence it leaves behind, the quiet understanding that the prison was never about breaking your body, but about reshaping your mind. For the Tau, the ultimate victory is not compliance obtained through fear, or loyalty extracted through pain. It is the prisoner who leaves, physically unbound, yet mentally altered, carrying with them the inescapable awareness that there was a system that functioned without cruelty, without chaos, and without arbitrary suffering. That realization is inescapable, and it lingers far longer than any cell ever could. Released prisoners return to a galaxy designed around struggle and survival. The Imperium demands obedience through terror. Battlefields reward ferocity and instinct over reason. Chaos thrives on corruption, conflict, and madness. Against such a universe, the memory of Tau order acts as both a weapon and a curse. Those who have experienced it find themselves alienated from the old ways. What once felt like normalcy now feels intolerable. Decisions that were once straightforward now seem cruel, illogical, and unbearable. The mind begins to measure every interaction against a standard that no one else has ever experienced, and in doing so, the prisoner becomes a perpetual outsider. Some try to resist this inner change, clinging desperately to old loyalties, old identities, old certainties. They find it exhausting. The Tau never force you to forget, they simply offer a better alternative to suffering. And when a mind has seen that alternative, the old world cannot simply be re-embraced. Defiance becomes exhausting, even pointless. You do not need to be tortured to be convinced that your previous life was inadequate, you only need to experience the quiet logic of a system that functions without cruelty. Others embrace it, sometimes without realizing it. The order, the clarity, the purpose that was once imposed during captivity now becomes a framework for life. Decisions are made according to reason, not rage. Contribution replaces obedience. Structure replaces chaos. And even when these individuals return to the Imperium or encounter hostile factions, their internal compass has shifted irreversibly. They no longer see the galaxy in black and white terms of good and evil, friend and foe. They see efficiency, logic, and the cost of wasted potential, and it haunts them. The most chilling lesson of all is that the Tau never need to shout, never need to strike, never need to instill terror. Their victory is quiet, patient, and invisible. The prison exists in the routines, the choices, the subtle guidance, and ultimately in the mind of the prisoner itself. Once that understanding is reached, the outside world can feel harsher than any cell. The prisoner is free physically, yet never entirely free mentally. The shadow of Tau order follows them, a constant reminder that captivity does not need to be painful to be absolute. And in that quiet, in that subtle reshaping of thought, lies the true horror of the Tau prison, a place you can leave, but a system you can never truly escape. These are the prisoners who, over months or years, have passed through every stage of Tau captivity and emerged not merely compliant but convinced. For them, the prison no longer exists as a physical space. It exists in thought, in habit, in perspective. The routines, the lessons, the subtle guidance, they have absorbed it all. Their former selves, shaped by fear, rage, or unquestioning loyalty, have been dismantled and replaced with something calibrated for efficiency, order, and contribution. To outsiders, they appear unchanged. To themselves, everything has shifted. Their former allegiances now seem trivial. Battles fought, banners defended, ideologies held sacred, all feel like distant echoes, faint and hollow compared to the certainty they have found in the greater good. The mind, once rebellious or distrustful, now seeks structure. Resistance feels wasteful. Chaos feels unbearable. Even anger, once a natural response to injustice, now seems inefficient. Every choice is measured against the collective good, and every action is weighed for utility. These individuals do not need chains. Their compliance is voluntary, but it is absolute. And yet, this is also where the subtle horror lies. They are not fully Tau. They cannot adopt the society's species, caste, or history. They remain outsiders, forever marked by the life they once lived. Yet they cannot fully return to the galaxy they left behind. Among Imperials, they feel alienated, burdened by the memory of a system that functioned without cruelty. Among their own kind, they are often distrusted, envied, or misunderstood. The mind that has seen an alternative cannot ignore it. The world outside now feels chaotic, arbitrary, and cruel in ways that no ordinary imprisonment could have conveyed. In this way, the Tau prison achieves something unprecedented in the galaxy. It creates a permanent psychological dislocation. The captive is free in the traditional sense, yet tethered by experience. Their body is unbound, but their mind has been subtly rewritten. Even when living voluntarily among the Tau, contributing to society, and participating willingly in the greater good, there is a trace of unease, a constant awareness that the life they once knew is gone, and that the stability they now experience was earned not by conquest, but by careful, methodical transformation. The ultimate achievement of a Tau prison is patience. Time, consistency, and subtle influence replace fear, pain, and violence. The outcome is more enduring, more absolute, and more insidious than any chains, bolt gun, or punishment could ever be. By the time a prisoner has internalized the system, the prison no longer holds them, they hold themselves, guided by the very logic that the Tau have cultivated. And in that realization, the true nature of their captivity becomes clear. Freedom is not the absence of walls, it is the presence of understanding. Once achieved, it is permanent, inescapable, and quietly terrifying. Even for those who never fully internalize the greater good, the experience leaves an indelible mark. The calm, the order, the absence of cruelty, it lingers in memory, like a shadow stretching across every subsequent choice. Prisoners who once seethed with hatred, who swore they would never yield, often find themselves replaying moments of calm clarity in their minds, comparing them relentlessly to the chaos of the wider galaxy. Every shouted order, every arbitrary punishment, every senseless act of violence becomes sharper, crueler, and harder to ignore. It is a perspective they cannot unsee, a mirror that reflects the inadequacy of their old world. Some try to reintegrate with their old societies. Imperial soldiers return to their units, civilians return to Imperial worlds, and alien captives attempt to rejoin their factions. But the memories of structured routines, consistent care, and patient reasoning haunt them. Orders are no longer merely commands, they are arbitrary constraints. Loyalty is no longer instinct, it is a choice weighed against remembered logic. The Tau prison has taught them, without cruelty or coercion, that systems can function without fear. And when the rest of the galaxy fails to measure up, disillusionment follows. Those who once clung, Fiercely to anger now feel it differently. Rage is inefficient. Resistance feels futile. Even defiance loses its clarity, because the prisoner has learned that confrontation is not the only path to influence or survival. The mind remembers the subtle rewards of cooperation, the quiet authority of rational guidance, and the sense that actions aligned with understanding, not hatred, produce results. It is not indoctrination in the traditional sense, yet it is transformative. It leaves former captives questioning everything they once believed. For some, the haunting is personal. They struggle to reconcile their survival instincts with the patience, logic, and structure that now shape their perception. They find themselves yearning for the predictability of captivity, for the certainty that every action would be acknowledged, assessed, and guided. The world outside may grant freedom, but it cannot offer the order they now crave. The freedom they fought for feels raw, chaotic, and punishing by comparison. And in that contrast lies the quiet terror of Tau imprisonment. It is not the chains that wound, nor the punishments that scar. It is the revelation that the galaxy itself is inconsistent, cruel, and arbitrary, while somewhere, there exists a system that functions without suffering. That knowledge cannot be erased. It cannot be unlearned. And once experienced, it follows the prisoner forever, a ghost of rationality haunting a universe that refuses to abide by it. For many, the return to the wider universe is a disorienting ordeal. The galaxy outside the Tau system is loud, chaotic, and unforgiving. Orders are inconsistent, authority is arbitrary, and suffering is expected as a measure of loyalty or faith. The prisoner who has experienced months or years of Tau order now finds themselves ill-equipped to navigate such a world. Where instinct once guided survival, now hesitation and doubt interfere. Decisions that once felt automatic now demand analysis and reflection. And in this friction between learned logic and external chaos, the mind begins to fracture quietly. Imperial soldiers, for example, often find themselves alienated from the very ranks they once called home. What once seemed normal, the endless drills, the arbitrary punishments, the blind obedience demanded by commissars, now feels barbaric. Every pointless order becomes a test of patience. Every act of cruelty resonates in sharper contrast to the rationality they experienced in Tau custody. Even attempts to follow protocol are haunted by the memory of a system where logic and consistency governed every action. The result is confusion, frustration, and a creeping sense of inadequacy. Civilians fare no better. Those who return to Imperial worlds may struggle to accept arbitrary deprivation, unjust punishments, or the unquestioned authority of local officials. They may cling to the memory of being treated as rational beings, capable of understanding and contributing. And yet, every interaction with an uncaring or irrational authority reinforces the haunting truth of their captivity. The galaxy is fundamentally broken, and nothing can restore the simplicity of order they once knew. Even some Tau prisoners who voluntarily remain within the system are not immune. While they may function efficiently and contribute willingly, a subtle tension lingers, the knowledge that freedom outside the Tau hierarchy exists, even if it is chaotic, violent, or irrational. This understanding creates a quiet unease, a reminder that the prison's influence is not just a product of the environment but of internalized reasoning. It is a mind forever altered, a consciousness tuned to a level of order the galaxy rarely provides. The ultimate horror of Tau imprisonment, then, is not in the walls, the routine, or even the transformation itself. It lies in the permanence of its effects. The prisoner may leave, but the lessons, the logic, and the patterns remain. They cannot return to the world they once knew without noticing its flaws, its cruelty, and its chaos. In this way, the Tau achieve a captivity far more enduring than any physical restraint. They reshape the mind, and in doing so, they leave behind prisoners who are simultaneously free and forever unsettled. For those who have survived the full breadth of Tau imprisonment, freedom can become a paradoxical punishment. The world they return to, whether imperial, alien, or otherwise, is loud, unpredictable, and governed by cruelty and chaos. Every instinct they once relied on feels inadequate, every command arbitrary, every social structure fragile and illogical. The prisoner who has adapted to the calm, measured logic of Tau order now perceives their surroundings through a lens that makes the familiar unbearable.